Bonjour, I am back from France, specifically Cannes, France, more specifically the Cannes Film Festival. It was a great time. It was an exhausting time, but still a great time. I watched a lot of movies. I ate a lot of French delicacies. I talked to Tom Cruise just for a few seconds. I watched even more movies. We did a lot of podcasting, but all in all, a very successful and productive trip to the Cannes Film Festival. But I'm back in the good old US of A. I've had my In-N-Out. It's the first meal I always have when I get back to the country. It is the best meal anyone could have. Argue with the wall. But this video is not dedicated to my Lord and Savior In-N-Out. That could be a good idea for the future. No, this video is me reporting back on all the films that I saw at the Cannes Film Festival. How many times have I said Cannes Film Festival? Let's get a counter up. Maybe take a shot every time I say it. Yeah, it is me just kind of reporting back high-level thoughts, reactions, but most importantly, movies that I saw that I think you should have on your radar. This episode will have no spoilers, just brief synopses of the plot, mainly because some of these movies are not out yet and some of them don't even have release dates yet. Also, this will be a ranking video of sorts. I will arrange them from my least favorite to my most favorite, and I'll attach a score to each of the movies, but take these scores with a grain of salt. As a grain of salt, for a grain of salt, something with salt. In a perfect world, I will rewatch all these movies because there is something popularly known as festival fever, where a movie will premiere at a festival and may seem better or sometimes worse simply because of the experience of being at said festival. And this happens time and time again. A movie will premiere at Cannes or at Sundance or TIFF or what have you and get a lot of buzz from festival goers, and then it hits the general audiences and they hate it. Think of like Anora from last year. There could be a couple titles from this year that get a similar treatment, but ultimately what I'm getting at is my scores could change in the future on a rewatch drastically. Maybe, or maybe not at all. At the end of the festival, I saw about 16 films, which, all things considered with my schedule, I think is very solid. First, let me go over the ones I did not get a chance to see that will not show up on this list. My proverbial white whales, the ones I was desperately trying to get a showing to, and with timing, I simply could not. And those movies were as follows, but not limited to Kristen Stewart's The Chronology of Water, Harris Dickinson's Urchin, and Harry Lighton's Pillion. And there's a whole list of movies that I really wish I could have seen, but these are the three that I made several valiant attempts to watch, but alas, fate had different plans. Damn you, fate. So without further ado, let's talk Cannes. Cannes? I've heard multiple variations. I'm sticking with Cannes, like Can You Feel Love Tonight, or Can You Hear the Music? The track from the Oppenheimer score. Great track. Great soundtrack. Great movie. Great meme. Sons of the Neon Night was a midnighter film, and typically midnight films at festivals are usually thrillers or horror-adjacent films, movies that are meant to titillate the French audiences of Cannes well into the late hours of the evening. And Sons of the Neon Night sounded like a cool movie. It has the word neon in the title. That's a cool-ass word. Let me read you just a snippet of the plot description, and you tell me if this doesn't sound like a cool-ass movie. A massive explosion and shootout in snowy Causeway Bay, Hong Kong reveals a pharmaceutical heir's plot. Massive? That's a word. Explosion? Shootout? Snowy? Pharmaceutical? Plot? Okay, maybe not plot, but those other words, those are cool-ass words. So I was convinced, based on the blog line itself, this will be a fun movie, an exciting movie. Turns out it was neither of those things. Instead, what transpires is an incoherent narrative overflowing with characters and subplots for a whopping 132 minutes. It also didn't help that the movie started like a half hour later than it was supposed to, so instead of starting at like 12:30, it started closer to 1 a.m. That was not Sons of the Neon Night's fault. That was the fault of Bono. Yes, that Bono of the famous band U2. Bono had a movie that premiered before Sons of the Neon Night and in the same theater, and apparently after his movie finished, he was just yapping, probably trying to secretly install his new album on our iPhones. We're on to you, Bono. I'm on to you, Bono. Anyways, I was a bit delirious walking out of this one around 3 a.m., and I thought maybe that's why I didn't like it, but then I checked Letterboxd the next day, and it appears that most people came to the consensus, even the showings the next day, like at normal times, that it wasn't a very good movie. So kind of a dreadful watch. Sorry to Sons of the Neon Night. Oh, Eddington. If you haven't deleted Twitter yet, well, one, why not? And two, prepare to do so. Ari Aster's latest satire on the year of 2020 is going to bring a wave of discourse of the insufferable kind. It's going to be a terrible time on the internet. I'm going to save most of my thoughts for a dedicated video on the movie when it releases, but long story short, it fell mostly flat for me. I found it uninteresting, borderline unintelligent. However, there were plenty of people who really enjoyed it. It's definitely more in the vein of something like Beau is Afraid. So on rewatch, maybe I'll see the Ari Aster light, or maybe I won't. Wes Anderson's latest, The Phoenician Scheme. I'm a firm believer that Wes Anderson has yet to make an outright bad movie. Asteroid City from a few years back is an all-timer for me, maybe my favorite Wes, or at the very least top 3. And I find the evolution of Wes's filmmaking and his filmography endlessly fascinating. So you can imagine my surprise when I found that The Phoenician Scheme, which is undeniably one of Wes's funniest, there's a great bit with Bryan Cranston and Tom Hanks, but ultimately I thought it was strangely cold. Not lifeless, but lacking a certain amount of heart that I usually find in many of his films. But Wes's films have historically grown on me after multiple watches, and I'm sure the same will apply to The Phoenician Scheme. I hope. Now imagine my face when I decide last minute I'm going to attend the midnight premiere of a movie called Exit 8, and I sit down and someone near me goes, "Hey, are you familiar with the video game this movie is based on?" What? This is a video game adaptation at Cannes? Huh? As some of you are aware, I have been working tirelessly to watch every video game adaptation for a future YouTube video, which, by the way, I think is going very well. I'm about halfway through the Resident Evil franchise. But then to learn, there is a brand new video game adaptation that is coming out soon, and it just happens to be premiering at Cannes, and I just happen to go to that showing. Wow, talk about fate. This time fate was on my side. Now, I have never played the Exit 8 game, but I did some quick researching and immediately I recognized it. I remember it was trending like 2-ish years ago, and I was familiar with the concept. Strangely, the movie has too much story. I wish it basked more in the concept of the game, what made the game really exciting. However, if you're a fan of the game, I think you'll probably be pretty happy with it, and it turned out to be a good time. The latest from Richard Linklater, Nouvelle Vague, which I spent the whole festival saying Nouvelle Vague, but it's essentially a biopic about the making of the immensely influential French New Wave film Breathless, directed by Jean-Luc Godard. It's essentially the cinephiles' Avengers Endgame. Sydney, my co-host, described it and compared it to Saturday Night, which I think is a very apt comparison. It's essentially 105 minutes of pointing at the screen going like, oh, look, it's Agnes Varda, and it's Truffaut and Romer. And I don't think Linklater is trying to do anything deeply serious with Nouvelle Vague except express his love for a very specific and important time in cinema history, which ultimately I think it's very successful in doing. There has been a bit of a dramatic reaction to this movie. It's not going to move mountains, but I also don't think it was trying to do that in the first place. Dossier 137, or Case 137, is a procedural about a protester in France who's essentially physically assaulted or shot at by a police officer. Maybe the definition of just a very well-made movie, from the direction to the editing to the performances. The ending is incredibly compelling. This is one of those movies that, if you see it available, I would highly recommend. Alpha is maybe the movie I'm most torn about, but also the movie I'm most excited to rewatch. Going into the festival, I think for myself and for a lot of people, there was really high expectations for this movie. And can you blame us? I mean, Julia Ducournau's last outing, Teton, won the Palme d'Or and is certifiably a masterpiece in my opinion. Raw is an incredibly impressive debut, and I think if you were to ask almost anybody at Cannes, this was a hotly anticipated film. Did that play a part in anyone's disappointment? Possibly. Let's be honest, it's impossible to walk into any movie with zero expectations. For Alpha, there's just so much confidence in the direction, there's some stunning images, wonderful performances, and yet strangely basic. I'm still parsing through a lot of my own thoughts, and hopefully this is one I can elaborate on in the future. Yeah, you're goddamn right. I saw the Australian horror thriller shark movie starring a very zany Jai Courtney in a packed theater at Cannes, and guess what? It rocked. But this is what I meant by festival fever. Did I enjoy Dangerous Animals more because I saw it in a packed theater at Cannes with a ton of exhausted Cannes goers where we laughed and cheered together? Possibly. Would my experience and my relationship to the movie be worse if I watched it at home on Shudder, where I would have been more critical of character decisions or silly performances? Also, possibly. But I don't want to take credit from the movie either. The movie is a more than solid thriller. Jai Courtney spends like 100 minutes just hamming it up and chewing the scenery. It does a really nice job using violence to emphasize tension, which feels really rare in horror nowadays. But most importantly, it knows exactly what it is. It does not take itself seriously, and it's a great time. 10 out of 10 would recommend. And by 10 out of 10, I mean a 3.5 out of 5, but you know, same thing. Arco, not to be confused with Arco, the gas station in the States, but Arco is a French, terrible joke. Arco is a French animated film. I'm still thinking about how bad that joke is. Arco is a French animated film that's been produced by Natalie Portman and actually picked up by Neon for North American distribution. Extremely funny, oozing with so much charm. I'm really happy Neon got this because it is a special movie that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy. Also, not to reduce films to their Oscar chances, but the Oscars have been more open to international animated films, and I think this is one that everyone should keep an eye on. I would not sleep on it. Sound of Falling is one of the earlier films in the festival that got a ton of buzz, and it's a difficult one to explain, so I'm going to pull out the handy-dandy letterbox so I can read the plot synopsis to you. Over the course of a century, as 4 girls from different time periods experience their youth on a German farm, their lives become intertwined until time seems to dissolve. That actually might make it sound more straightforward than it actually is, but it does capture the overall essence of the story it's telling. It's told in a nonlinear fashion, and that can be hard to follow at times, which is maybe the point, but it's a stunning movie. A heavy movie, a very heavy film, but one that really digs its claws into you and doesn't really let go. Really cool that Mubi has picked it up because it is a movie that I think a lot of people need to see. Look, I could talk for hours about The Final Reckoning. In fact, I already did on the podcast for around 2 hours. Is that first hour a mess? Probably. You know what? No, definitely it is. Why is Luther sick? Why did they massacre my boy Gabriel? What were they even thinking with Grace? No one even mentioned Ilsa. There are a lot of questions and very few answers. And yet, I was always locked in, especially once we get towards the second half, specifically from St. Matthew's Island in the submarine sequence onward. It is everything I want from a Mission Impossible movie. Plus, the ending made me cry. Eventually, I want to do a deep dive and breakdown of this entire franchise. Not sure when I'll have time to do that, but for now, I am a fan. Also, technically, this is the 17th film of my Cannes Film Festival because I watched it like at 8 p.m. on the 14th and then again at 8 a.m. on the 15th. So like twice in 12 hours and was worth every second. For those we'll never meet. It makes me tear up every time. It was just an accident. This is the Palme d'Or winner, not the movie I was predicting. That's another movie that is forthcoming on this list, but still a very well-deserved win. The plot is not the most straightforward. Even reading it wouldn't do it much justice, but this was a movie, funny enough, I saw it 8:30 in the morning. I had tickets to see Eleanor the Great, which is the Scarlett Johansson directorial debut. And I woke up and I thought, maybe I don't want to watch this movie, and so I was able to score last-minute tickets to It Was Just an Accident. Turns out that was an excellent decision by me. Yay! But it's a bold, unflinching film from a director who has so much courage. Jafar Panahi and this film, I think, perfectly encapsulates what makes filmmaking as an art form so powerful. Incredible movie through and through, and has an ending that I think will live with me for quite some time. So once it's available, ensure you are marking your calendars. I have so much to say about Highest to Lowest. I will absolutely have a dedicated review video once it releases in late August, early September. That's when I'll scream at A24 and Apple for botching the theatrical release. But for now, just know this. The first 45 minutes, it takes some time. Trust the process. Joel Embiid style. That seems like an appropriate reference considering it's Spike. Maybe I should have said Patrick Ewing style. I don't know. Bad sports analogies aside, there is a huge turning point in this movie, and it goes from zero to hero just like that. That's a Disney reference. And that's not exactly to say the first 45 minutes are a zero, but that will be the biggest obstacle for first-time viewers, guaranteed. But I cannot emphasize enough, once it gets to that second and third act, it is firing on all cylinders. Denzel Washington, unsurprisingly, one of the greatest to ever do it. A$AP Rocky, kind of an incredible actor. He's who The Weeknd wishes he could be. There are sequences that I am just like foaming at the mouth to talk about, but I'm going to wait until the rest of the world sees it, and I'm so excited for people to watch it. Spike Lee, if you're listening, I know you're not, please never stop making movies. Even if you're a New Yorker and subsequently a Yankees fan. Go Dodgers. Brazil, 1977, Marcelo, a technology expert in his early 40s, is on the run. He arrives in Recife, hopefully I'm saying that correct, during Carnival weekend, hoping to reunite with his son, but soon realizes that the city is far from being the non-violent refuge he seeks. That is your plot summary for The Secret Agent. I wanted to read that because this movie is not an espionage thriller, as the title may imply. And that's okay, it is so much more than that. This one was also picked up by Neon, which is really exciting because the world needs to see Wagner Moura's performance. It is nothing short of extraordinary. Probably my favorite performance of the festival. Welcome back, Lynn Ramsey. It's been far too long. Die My Love plunges us into the lives of Grace and Jackson, who are played by Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson, respectively. And we follow Grace as she begins to descend into a postpartum psychosis, battling postpartum depression. It has its more surreal moments, but it's just very good at illustrating the anxiety of Grace's character, and not just through the immaculate performance from Jennifer Lawrence, which might be a career best role, but also the way that Lynn Ramsey uses sound and editing and music is just astounding. Movie scooped this one up, which is good news for everyone because it's such a sensory experience that it wouldn't be the same to watch it at home. It would still be good, but obviously prefer to watch it in theater. Maybe it's not entirely shocking that Sentimental Value is at the top of my list. This is the movie that had a 19-minute standing ovation. And by the way, if you've ever wondered if these ovations are as long as they report to be, I can confirm they are very long. I was present at the Sentimental Value ovation. I did dip after 13 minutes. My hands were getting tired. But I can confirm as well, people were amped for this movie. Kind of justified. Trier, whose last movie, The Worst Person in the World, which received similar praise, is just so good at expressing genuine, sincere human love. There's a level of authenticity that his films achieve that feels very rare nowadays. And while Sentimental Value is very different in subject matter compared to The Worst Person in the World, it's just as tender. You'll laugh, you'll cry. This will end up being on many people's end-of-year top 10 list. I guarantee it. Just like the guy from Men's Warehouse. Where is that guy, by the way? Is he still around? Hopefully. Hope you're doing well, guy from Men's Warehouse. But that wraps up my watches at the Cannes Film Festival. 16 movies, 17 if you count that I watched Mission Impossible 2 times. It was an excellent festival. I'm always excited to attend the Cannes Film Festival. What's that counter at, by the way? I don't know. Let me know which movies from Cannes you are most excited to check out. Now that I'm back from Cannes and from Europe, I hope to get a more structured YouTube schedule going. But I do appreciate everybody giving me feedback on the most recent videos. Next time you hear from me on this channel should be the May 2025 new movie recap, which I think I'm mostly caught up on. But that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day, night, weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.